Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Heading into 2025, Dill, what will be the college football programs that make the college football playoffs for the first time? We got 8 teams we want to talk about, and this was kind of a hard episode to put together because there were probably, maybe 12 teams that we wanted to put on this list. We whittled it down to 8. Y'all let it fly in the comment section. This is inherently one of these discussions that, people are going to get fired up about. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, let's lead this off with my at least my number one team in terms of teams I feel confident will make the playoffs for the first time. And I was really confident with this team last year, 12 months ago. Obviously got burnt. The Miami Hurricanes, they're a really good football team. I think from a roster standpoint, this is a college football playoff caliber team, but the schedule is certainly not easy. What makes you confident that Mario Cristobal can get it done in 2025?
It starts, and I know I would have said this last year, but they really should get themselves to this ACC championship game. Like, again,
Agreed.
you look, Florida and Notre Dame out of conference is tough. Like, those are
Agreed.
two teams. Like, Notre Dame, certainly one of the best in the country. Florida, as high of a ceiling as anyone in the country. But I look at their ACC schedule with no Clemson. There's not a team that they should lose to. And now that's been a problem for Miami for the past couple of years, is losing to teams in the ACC that they shouldn't be losing to. But I look at the corrections they've made on the defensive side of the ball, the personnel they brought into the secondary, new defensive coordinator, and the offense should still be really good because they have a great offensive line, a great running back room, and a quarterback who, again, if they just get some of those young wide receivers to play well, they're really complete teams. So they have a really good path to the ACC championship game. And I think that's
But
probably why
Bill,
I have the
okay,
highest.
so you're right. They have a good path to the ACC championship game, especially when you don't have to play Clemson, who I think is, clearly it's Miami and Clemson in terms of the two top teams in this conference. It's kind of a tricky schedule, though, right? You
No, it
get
is.
Louisville at home. Louisville is never an easy out. You have to go on the road to SMU. And then at the end of the year, Dill, you have to go on the road to Virginia Tech and you have to go on the road to Pitt. That's a South Florida team going up to the north in late November. Those are not ideal November games on the road if you're Mario Cristobal in Miami. Now, you talked about, can we trust Miami this year? We knew the ceiling for Miami was super high in 2024, right? And when you have the number one offense in the country, you got a really high ceiling. Teams don't want to play you, but they would drop games they shouldn't have dropped. Here's maybe something you can take a little bit of confidence in. Can they potentially be a little bit more of a reliable football team in 2025? And what I mean by that is, all right, the defense is going to get better. How much it gets better is probably dependent on how good this Miami team is, but they're going to get better on defense and they're going to be able to run the football better, which helps you control games and doesn't allow you to get in these games where you look up in the fourth quarter and you're like, we're in a one possession shootout, where it seemed like Miami found themselves in a lot in 2024. Better defense, using the run game more, that could result in Miami, staying safe in terms of some of these trap games you might see in the ACC in 2025.
And again, I like that is why I kind of have them higher than some teams that I'm not sure they're necessarily better than. I look at their path to that college football playoff and their path through the ACC. Again, they really shouldn't be losing those type of games. They're so much more talented than a Virginia Tech, a Pitt, a Louisville, those type of teams.
Moving on, South Carolina. There are question marks about South Carolina, right? But the question marks are on the defensive line, specifically on the inside. Do they have enough bodies and are they talented enough? And then off-ball linebacker. There's also a lot of things to really like about South Carolina going into 2025. Now, when you have a quarterback like Lenore Sellers, you're going to have a chance to win every single game you play it. And I do like how the schedule lines up, especially early. You look at it, Virginia Tech neutral site. That's a nice game where I'm confident South Carolina can win that game, but it's not a cupcake, and you come out of that.
It feels like a bigger game than it probably is, because I'm with you. I don't think Virginia Tech's the greatest, but they are still Virginia Tech. They're not Coastal Carolina.
Ain't no slouch. And so you get a little momentum early in the season. Sunday night game. Fire me up for that. I believe Sunday night. We'll see when it kicks off. South Carolina State, Vanderbilt. You go on the road to Missouri, your only road game, true road game, in the month of September. I don't think Missouri will be as good as they were in the 2024 year. Certainly not as in 2023. And you get Kentucky at home. Dill, you should go through the months of September, at least in my opinion, with how I view South Carolina undefeated. And then you get your bye week before you go in one of your biggest tests that you'll have on the road at LSU. To me, I look at the schedule, though, and say, can you get to that Clemson game 10-1 or 9-2? And if you're in that situation, that game suddenly becomes, I think Clemson will be a top 5 team in the country. That game suddenly becomes a playing game. They probably should have gotten in after they beat Clemson last year to the college football playoffs, at least my opinion. How are you feeling about them
I mean,
Gamecocks?
as far as schedules go, like they have the schedule you kind of want. I think they avoid Georgia and Texas. Those two teams, to me, feel like the strongest teams in the SEC right now. Texas, especially. So you again, I think you avoid the big dogs. You avoid Florida, which I think is a game you certainly
Yep.
want to avoid. And then I look at the recipe. They have the quarterback, and that's not been something you've been able to say at South Carolina. Like Rattler was playing good for them, but it didn't feel like they had like elite premier quarterback play in the college level. They right now have it. And again, I look at so many teams out here that I just don't trust quarterback play. I look at what Lenora Sellers can do. They have the recipe and they have the schedule. If their defense can play somewhere close to what they played last year, yeah, this is a team that
And here's one other thing I'll throw in there, especially for these, tough on the road games, at LSU, at Texas A&M. I think they have the offensive line. And this is probably the first time in a while that we're talking about South Carolina having an offensive line that can hold up in potential. I know this is probably the hottest take I have going into the season. I think this South Carolina offensive line might be one of the better units in the conference. That's also something South Carolina has just not been able to say very often over the last couple of years. Number 3, them Florida Gators. They ain't got any question marks on it. And at least in my opinion, I look at that depth chart, maybe some depth on the defensive line, but in terms of a pure roster deal, they are a college football playoff caliber team. Now the question is, can Billy Napier in this Florida Gators program, a program that has historically been very inconsistent, if you want to make the college football playoffs, well, guess what? You got to be consistent. How are we feeling about Florida? It's not the easiest schedule, and that's why we have them number 3 here. But it's a team that can win every football game on the schedule.
I was gonna say their ceiling's probably higher than anyone on this list that we have. I do
I
look.
think I agree.
I got my questions about what Billy Napier can do over a 12-game season.
Yes.
That hasn't been proven to be particularly effective at Florida yet. But this is a team that talent to talent, like I think they can win a national championship. I think they should be able to beat anyone on their schedule. Like they have the ability to beat anyone on their schedule. But you're right. You just look, this is an absolute war zone of a schedule. Like really, really tough games. You got Texas, you got Miami out of conference. Like,
So here's my question, Dill. Can you get through their first 4 games 3-1? That's all I need, right? Can you go on the road and beat LSU, or can you go on the road and beat Miami? You go 3-1 into your bye week. Finally, this Florida team has some momentum early on in the season, which I feel like they just have never had. And then you get your bye week, and then you get Texas at home. And Dill, that you go 3-1. Florida's looking at a top 10 team in the country with Texas coming to town. With the quarterback in Arch Manning, who, he's a 5-star quarterback, but he's a relatively green as a quarterback as well. That's a game where you have circled and say if you can get 3-1 heading into that game and potentially knock off Texas, you feel really good about what this team can do in the college football playoffs. But that's kind of those first 5 games, those first 4 games, I think are really big for Florida. Number 4 here, another SEC team, Ole Miss. Dill, I think they have a favorable schedule. I don't hate the schedule, right? You get LSU at home in the month of September. You should be undefeated, or not undefeated, but that LSU game at the end of September is going to be a big one. My problem with Ole Miss is that it's just really hard to make an argument that they're a better football team than they were in 2024, a team that didn't make the college football playoffs. Because you look at it and say, even if you're buying the hype in Austin Simmons, which I kind of am, to be honest, I think Austin Simmons can rip it. Even if he is as good as Jackson Dart, which is probably an aggressive claim, but I think it could be true. Are they better at any other position than they were last year? Defensive line's a massive downgrade. Offensive line's probably downgrade. You're downgrading at wide receiver. My question is not the schedule for Ole Miss. Is it a good enough team? Is probably the question I have for Ole Miss.
yeah, like I just look like, would I take them or like, what do I think the spread would be with them in Florida and them in South Carolina? Like, honestly, I'd probably lean those other teams. I just think they have a lot more coming back, a lot more proven. And then Ole Miss is still like, I mean, can they be consistent? Can they win?
Yeah.
Like, can they not drop a game against Kentucky? Like they were a really, really good team last year. I mean, that's a team. If they got to the national championship, 100% could have won it because they had the defensive line. Like their offensive line, I don't think was as good as I probably would have liked it to be last year, but they had enough to do like
Oh
to win
yeah,
a national
their
championship.
ceiling last year was national championship. No doubt about
And
it.
I don't think they have that type of
No.
ceiling. Like again, they could probably scratch their way to a college football playoff appearance because maybe their schedule does shape up okay. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. The question is, are they a good enough team? Like, do they have the Jimmies and Joes, especially on defense, where they're replacing a lot of really good players? I just don't totally see it. I don't think they have the portal class that they need to have in a given year to be that type of team.
Here's another team going to the Big Ten here, Illinois. It's a very popular team amongst college football fans, and rightfully so. Ton of returning production. A quarterback in Luke Altmaier, who is not going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. But how many quarterbacks are you taking over Luke Altmaier, especially in the Big Ten? The answer is probably not that many. He's about as steady as it comes. And when you have the returning production that Illinois has, when you really have a team that kind of knows what they are and what they want to do, and then you have a schedule that I think is very gettable too, where you look at it and say, they're the only two games where I might not favor Illinois in. I mean, you have USC, but you get USC at home. You have Ohio State at home, but you're probably not taking them to win. On the road at Indiana, we'll see what Indiana looks like. And there's a lot of
Indiana doesn't scare me like that. I trust Illinois more right now because I've seen it like been building up into what they can be. I'm a little concerned about the wide receiver play. I think that's something that like sneaky was
agreed.
awesome last year.
Yep.
Are they replacing that? Probably not. But like they're gonna have the offensive line back. I wish they probably had more top end running back ability. But just down and down out, like Brett Bielema has done a really good job of developing players, especially on the defensive side of the ball where I just have confidence in what they can do. And when you miss Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon in the Big Ten,
That's
you have
huge.
a really good path to being a
If
one or
you're
two.
they'll say this, if you're a 2-loss team going into Saturday, October 25th, I'm favoring Illinois in every single one of these games in the back half.
Their issue might be two losses might be a little dangerous for them making the playoff, especially with what happened in Indiana last year, because it's not a good enough strength of schedule to lose more. I mean, if they lose two, they're on the bubble. If they lose one, I think they're in. But
Well,
like,
and it probably depends on, you scroll up and say, all right, if they
yeah,
lose
how
to
good's
Indiana, how
USC?
good is
How good's
Indiana? And then if they beat USC, how good is USC? You're right. The strength of schedule would be a concern, similar to how it was with Indiana last year. We'll see.
Especially if they get smoked by Ohio State, and I still think like Ohio State can do that to them for sure. They don't have the top end talent to really compete with Ohio State, I don't think.
Texas Tech winning the Big 12. The boys
My
are yeah, I think it'd be my pick too, just because I think they're the most talented team in the Big 12 with what they did in the portal. But most importantly, Dill, look, Arizona State has Sam Leavitt, and Sam Leavitt's a really good quarterback, probably the best quarterback in this conference. I do think Texas Tech probably has the best line of scrimmage play in this conference. And that in the Big 12, where there are some pretty good quarterbacks, having the best line of scrimmage play is something that I think can differentiate you in this conference, because I don't look at line of scrimmage play and say, look, Utah just ain't that team along the line of scrimmage that we remember them being in the Pac-12. And so I look at it and say, you don't have a problem at quarterback. I think Morton's a very good quarterback. Then you have probably the best line of scrimmage play in this conference. They're my pick to win the Big 12 and get into the college football playoff.
And I think Joey McGuire told you what he thinks of Baron Morton. I think this is a team that, like, are they going to be like this team consistently? Do they have a model in place that I think is consistent? No, it's kind of like Ole Miss. But I look at the way he loaded up, and again, got guys at those positions that are just difference makers, defensive line, offensive tackle. Like, they went out big battles.
It's Ole Miss Junior. It's Ole Miss Junior, or Ole Miss Light, you might say.
And they kept a pretty good nucleus of talent. Like I look,
exactly what Ole Miss did.
Ole Miss linebackers can play, and
Ole Miss knew. Sorry, I'm talking over you. My fault. Ole Miss knew that they had a solid nucleus coming back going into 2024, and they said, "Hey, if we go be very aggressive in the portal, we can put a college football playoff caliber team together." That's exactly what they did. Now, they fell short of expectations, but they damn sure put out a college football playoff caliber roster. I think, like you said, and Coach McGuire knows we have that nucleus that can do something special. Let's go make sure we're pushing our chips in, and they did that in the transfer portal. Texas A&M, I think we're a little low on them, Dill. The schedule is not great, but all right, let me say, give me 90 seconds, start the timer, and I'll give you a little elevator pitch here. Mike Elko going into year 2, it's probably where I'd start. Coach Colin Klein going into year 2 as an OC with Marcel Reed. And so now you have a quarterback coming back who's now going to be the guy with the offense that is, it's going to be catered to what Marcel Reed does very well. They went out and added a ton of talent in the transfer portal at the pass catcher spot, which was probably the worst spot on this team last year. And they return almost every single one of their contributors on the offensive line. There's a lot of reason to think Marcel Reed takes a massive jump in the 2025 year. And if he does that, you feel good about Texas A&M. And now the question is, can you replace all that NFL talent on the defensive line? And we will see if that happens for Texas A&M. But if they can do that and they get a guy like DJ Hicks or a guy like Dalen Evans to step up, and that defensive line can be a solid unit in the SEC with Marcel Reed taking a step of which I think he will take, this Texas A&M team can be a college football playoff team.
And again, do they have the ceiling for sure, but I still they need to make some big steps in a couple of spots. Like their offensive line needs to certainly take some pretty big steps. I'm not sure that, again, that's probably you just need to build up to that. That isn't something I think you can fix overnight. I certainly don't think they went out and did it or made a particularly great effort to fix it overnight, if you will, which again, I'm okay with because you got guys like Lamont Rogers coming in. So that's what they need to have in the future. And I think they'll have it. But they need to overturn the defense, which was porous, to say the least, and they're losing legit NFL dudes. I just look with a not easy SEC schedule and Notre Dame out of conference, that's – I don't know if they have the team that I'd favor them in enough of these games to make me really confident that they're going to –
The offensive line, I think Mike Elko told you what he thinks of that unit. Hey, we're going to go out and retain everybody. And
they did a good job in the run. I'll give them that. But their pass pro was weak.
Look, they got better. They got night and day better from what they were in 2023. I think Adam Cushing is doing a great job with that unit. I think
I'm not disagreeing with that, but you still need more. You need more NFL tackles. I don't think either of those guys are NFL tackles.
I think Tracy could be. I don't. Maybe you might be right on the right side. Last one, Nebraska. I think they have a schedule to do so. I got question marks about this Nebraska team, and look, there are reasons to believe this team gets better. Right, Matt Rule year 3. Dylan Raiola going into year 2, a guy, he can be a legitimate difference maker that can lead a program to the college football playoffs. They got way better wide receiver talent around him. Another thing that stands out is this offensive line finally feels deep, which is just not the case for Nebraska over the first 2 years of Matt Rule's tenure. The defense might take a big step back. You got a new defensive coordinator. I think you lost some legitimate difference makers, guys like Ty Nash on the defensive line, but Dill, you got a schedule that's ideal, in my opinion. You look at it, say Cincinnati, Akron, HCU, which is Houston Christian University, shouldn't be on Nebraska's schedule, but is. You should be 3-0. Then you get Michigan. You get Michigan at home, Dill, in the month of September with what we think will be a true freshman quarterback. That's a good spot to be in. And if you can maybe win that football game, this schedule opens up. Michigan State, Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern, USC at home. You on the road to UCLA. The only game I see it as I don't think they'll win it here is on the road at Penn State.
Well, they got 2 games that they're certainly not going to be favorites, and with Michigan as well, I would imagine. But I think you're right. The schedule, not brutal.
What do you think that spread's going to be for Michigan, Nebraska? Michigan on the road there.
That's such a wide variance because I do think Nebraska is going to struggle to score on Michigan, to be very frank. Are those tackles good enough to deal with the edge play that Michigan's going to be coming in with? I kind of doubt it, frankly. So I look Michigan's offense, who knows what we're gonna get? That's the mystery of all mysteries in the Big Ten, I think. But I just look is there another team kind of I have with Billy Napier, frankly, and Mario Cristobal probably to a lesser extent? Are they a team that's gonna win enough? Matt Rule's lost a lot of games that he's been a lot better than. Nebraska's been better in games against teams like Iowa. In other games like that, and they've lost way too many of them over the past 2 years. He's still got to prove it to me, I think, at Nebraska. Are they a winning program? Are they going to win games that they should win consistently? Because they have not been doing that.
Yeah, I think that's fair too, but that schedule, man, I mean, you got to feel great about it. Because I circle and say,
I don't think it's as great as you're implying because USC is not an
yeah,
easy.
you go, okay, you have
They do
four
have
games.
they do have two of the big boys. Like
You
I
have
look
four
at Illinois,
games.
it's so much more favorable.
You have no, you have 4 games. You got Michigan, you got USC, Penn State, and Iowa. 4 games. And if you can win 2 of them, you're probably getting to the college football playoffs. And that's assuming you don't drop any other games you shouldn't drop, which you're right. Matt Rose got to show us.
Like, are we totally sure
you
that
got
UCLA is not a game for
oh
Nebraska, right? They beat them last year.
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But you get 3 out of 4 of those at home. And I think
Yeah,
that's big because
that is a loud stadium. I'll give them
yeah,
that.
we've been there. It's hard to play in. We'll see though. There's a reason Nebraska's coming in last year.
I think this is where they should be. Like their schedule sets up okay, but it's not a team I have a ton of faith in yet.
I agree.
I'll still have to see more.
I agree. We'll wrap it up there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.